Welcome back to the Myth series in depth. This mission occurs right after defeating Mulligan on the same day down the Norn Pass towards Lankerfen.
Upon finding Mulligan's force, the band of heroes fought like wolves, cutting their way to the form of Mulligan. There, Konak and the Faceless Terror squared off as the battle raged around them. After a sword battle the likes of which had never been seen, Mulligan clutched his final wound and dropped into the snow and mud. The undead in his army began to shiver, collapsing into piles as the magic that held them together was no more. The war had been won, but at a terrible price. First, the smiths of Myrthemne and the people of the Downs. Then the ogre and the 12 duns had perished. Even the emperor himself had given his life to this conflict. But now, finally, the terror of Mulligan's war was over. With Mulligan's blood still wet on his sword, Konak led his battered force back down the Norn Pass.
Unlike what actually happened in the mission, the journal tells us that Konak defeated Mulligan, the Faceless Terror, which caused his undead army to collapse as the magic wore off. They have won the war with great casualties. Or have they? This mission starts with a short dialogue, so we will play that dialogue and discuss it shortly before we jump into the mission.
Majoran, so now you make your move.
You're not quite as stupid as I thought.
I knew that you were the traitor to the Empire. That you were responsible for bringing Mulligan to flesh again.
Clever. You have it all figured out, do you?
No. I did not realize that Myrddred was your puppet as well.
Myrddred! Of all the scheming!
You don't understand. I never meant to.
You would do anything for the powers I have taught you. Keeping your eye on this barbarian was a simple task.
You are the one responsible for the death of the Emperor!
Quite true. And now, the Empire of the Cath Bruig is rightfully mine. You can join me if you like. I need a warrior of your status and skill to lead my armies.
All you will get from me is the edge of my axe, traitor!
Faugh! Perhaps you are the ignorant savage I thought you were.
Enough talk, murderer!
Kill them!
Konak makes it known that he knew that Majoran was the traitor. Perhaps making the accusation within the walls of Lankerfen would have brought about a civil war, which did not seem like the best strategic move at the time. Konak starts the conversation by saying, "So now you make your move." What exactly was his move? Let me explain. Now the game hasn't told us explicitly yet, however, we will find that Majoran is in fact the true leveler. Mulligan was just his puppet. Majoran's plan was to kill Konak and his fellow forces so that he could return to Lankerfen and become the new emperor, claiming that Emperor Leotrim and Konak had died to Mulligan. With the Cath Bruig behind him, nothing would stand in the leveler's way. We learned that Mulligan was in fact brought back to life by the leveler. This would mean that in fact Mulligan would be equivalent to a fallen lord if you were looking for a Mulligan equivalent in Myth the Fallen Lords. He is a little bit different though, because he was not a hero in the previous age, but instead was a leveler himself in the previous age. Konak and Damas are surprised at Myrddred being a part of Majoran's plans. Myrddred says, "You don't understand, I never meant to," which suggests that perhaps Myrddred was also used without his knowledge. His lust for power may have clouded his judgment towards Majoran. Myrddred was an assistant of Majoran and likely learned most of his magical powers from him. In fact, in this mission we will also be going against the warlocks of Skalamots, since they are subservient to Majoran. After all, Majoran trained most of the warlocks. In this mission, Majoran has some crazy powerful fireball attack that requires some diversion and sacrifices to get by. This might be the most magically gifted leveler to ever walk the face of myth. Majaran has a couple of flavor texts that tell us more about him. Having left the Avatara under dark conditions, Majaran studied the art of fire magic. Majaran soon became the High Master of the Warlocks of Skullomance and ruled as such for a century. It is Majaran who brought the might of the Warlocks to the Cath Brug. As said by the soldiers of Lankerfin, the Warlocks do not fight for the Emperor. The Warlocks fight because Majaran tells them to. Majaran dabbled into powers that risked the destruction of his soul, but through the tribulations he became even more powerful. It is rumored that his unrelenting fervor for the discovery of dark knowledge stemmed from not having a soul to lose. Majaran is quite the enemy, isn't he? Now let's jump to the mission and put an end to the leveler. Hunt down the traitor Majaran and cut him down. So all I did was I start moving my units down here to deal with a couple warlocks and some warriors. We got to take them down. And we are ready. These warlocks in this mission can be a major pain in the butt because you think you got them and then they shoot like a mile long fireball that kills you, and it's really freaking annoying. Let me tell you. Let me tell you, because these warlocks' range is definitely farther than mid 2. So I'm a little worried about this warlock up here. This warlock, this thing will block him, so I'm not as worried about him.
Out of the way!
Okay, now I got him down, so that makes me feel a little better, but I gotta take care of this warlock. Seems like he doesn't want to come close enough for me to shoot him. They tend to want to patrol like just outside EV range for some reason. But, you know, because I have the high ground, I think my range is farther, so they're not actually coming close enough to shoot. It's kind of weird. Okay, so there's this big open area. Kind of come to the north. Alright, there's 3 passageways right here we gotta get through. The center one's the easiest because there's all 4 archers. There's a warlock on each side. You could, you know, use some dwarves to block the warlock's fireball in order to make them run out of mana, but it's kind of hard at times, so it's just easiest to kill these guys by far.
Maeldun.
We're just gonna shoot. We have so many heals, we're just gonna let this guy get hurt.
Moving.
Then we're gonna run back. Okay, so once we go through the pass with our melee, they're gonna come at us. So what we can do is we can kind of come up here, you know, with our doors. You wouldn't think that, but the warlocks, if they shoot right here, they'll hit nothing. So there's that going for us.
Already there.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
We got so many heals, we might as well use them. Okay, let's draw them out and kick some butt.
Over here. Over
This-
here.
The one thing that might be a problem is the archers shooting up here. So we could chase them down. So once we go through here, we'll see this warlock on the right start to move.
Let's go.
We can run back right away. And we can kind of circle to the,
Over here.
kind of go wide though, because this warlock, as I said, their range is ridiculous.
Let's go! Over here! Yeah!
They might surprise you with their range.
Let's go! Yeah!
So we can come over here and we can kill these bowmen. Sure, you're hitting my dwarf, but you're also dead.
Over here! I'm moving!
That didn't work very well with killing the archers like I was hoping, but it's alright. So the warlocks will park up here somewhere trying to shoot our doors, and they won't be able to. So then we can just wait till this guy starts shooting them too. They can't really hurt each other. Or no, he did kill the other one. Okay. They can't hurt themselves. They can hurt each other. So now we can heal this one dwarf that took some arrows. How did you get hurt? Sometimes like your archers will hit each other. I would not be surprised if they like moved and hit each other.
Let's go! Yeah! Let's go!
Okay, this is another big open area. There's really nothing to see until you get to that kind of this kind of corner.
Over here! Let's go!
Okay, we're gonna draw them out. So this warlock up here kind of blocking our path, some archers, you got some warriors on the side. So if we kind of come over here, kind of bait out these warriors. Just don't go in range where the warlock can shoot you. He'll tend to shoot down here automatically if you get in a certain range, but if you get close enough where he can target you, it'll be bad.
I'm moving. Yeah.
Okay, so we're trying to stay in range so these warriors will come out. We want to kill the warriors.
Yeah. On my way.
We kind of keep picking them off. We got our warrior, or our swords ready.
On my way. I'm moving. I'm moving. Let's go.
Okay, if they're gonna come at us, we're just gonna chop them down. Okay, now we just have Maeldun's warlock and a couple. You want to bait them to shoot again.
Moving.
I don't think he can actually target my guy. We did target him. That's alright. He should. Okay, that's what I was expecting him to do. Just auto shoot down here, and now we can go in and kill him. Because he's out of mana.
Moving. Done. Already there. Yes.
Nailed him.
shooting my hero on guard instead of dealing with my archers.
Sweet!
Already there.
Okay, now we gotta worry about Majarin. He's shooting all these crazy fireballs down. He's a pain in the butt. They try to dodge these fireballs that come down. They're so freaking huge. Okay, good, that one's behind. So I think we'll make it. There's kind of one that comes down here, one that comes down here. They kind of, there's like the set areas that he always shoots at. And then we can just rush down these archers. I don't care if they hit me a few times. Okay, let's keep all these guys down here. We just need this guy, Konak, and 2 Berserks, and we're on our way to destroy Majarin. Okay, we're gonna save it up here just because sometimes you get unlucky and his fireballs come back. Because if you get in a certain range, he'll shoot these fireballs and they will follow your guys, and they're basically impossible to dodge. And he has a group of warriors on each side of him. So what we got to do is we got to get him to divert. So we're gonna have to sacrifice units because it's basically impossible to get by his fireballs without somebody dying. I've tried using some dwarves. If you blow up your dwarves like on here, like let's say I blew up some grenades right here, it kind of turned to the left a little bit, but it won't disappear like a regular warlock's fireball. So I was trying it. I got my dwarves, you know, kind of like up to here or something, you know, by hitting them and bouncing them away, but eventually, you know, the fireballs will come back from behind to like loop around. I feel like that happens sometimes, and there's just nothing you can do about it. Even when you're sacrificing units, sometimes they'll shoot and they'll somehow come back, so we just hope that doesn't happen. So we got some guys going on their distractions, so we're kind of sending one guy here. You see, they'll curve towards him. We're hoping that, you know, he'll shoot another one over here and wipe out his forces, but it looks like he's not going to. He's gonna shoot up Berserk. Now, you might be like, oh, this guy got through too. Oh wow, only got 1 casualty. I must have timed that really well. So we want to run away from the... He's pretty fast. So you can kind of run away from... Oh, here comes the fireball back. Oh no. Okay. So we had to lose him. You see, I split him up kind of last minute because that fireball was coming back for that Berserk. Oh well, we'll take him out. So now he's fast enough, so you can just keep running away from the warriors and keep chopping them down. If he's closer, you can just, you know, keep running past him so the warriors can't get close enough to you to damage you. So you see, after you do so many hits, you'll kind of get like stunned. We're gonna save it right here, real quick, and you'll see why. So they kind of leave him alone. So I kind of think this is like a binding dream. Like he was like mind controlling them, kind of like he was the Emperor, and so like they're kind of leaving him. I'll talk about more about his binding dream in a bit, but you can see he's just kind of here. He's just kind of stuck. So once you kill him, it's fun because once you kill him, he'll say some funny stuff. It's also like when I was hitting him, he made some funny sounds. But like once you kill him, he'll make funny sounds, and you'll see like when his head is bouncing, it'll make a sound every time it hits, and he'll say stuff like "I'll bite your leg off," or you know, let's call it a draw, or stuff like that. So I'm gonna slow it down so it's easier to see when his head is bouncing, the noises and stuff, but it's pretty entertaining. So enjoy.
All right, we'll call it a draw. Have you ever defeat me? Never, savage! Savage! Savage!
I think it's entertaining. If you didn't catch that, you should watch it again. It's pretty entertaining.
Majaran's body lay in the cold snow as Konak held aloft the traitor's severed, yet still screaming, head.
Well, that's the mission. Final mission in the game. Hope you enjoyed it. The windscreen shows Konak holding up Majaran's still living decapitated head. It seems with Majaran's crazy magical abilities, he was able to stay alive even without his body. Konak and Maeldun are both giving each other a nasty face. In the image, you can see the captured Mildred behind them. It almost looks like Mildred is hanging his head in shame. The windscreen just tells us that the traitor's head was still screaming when Konak was holding it. The last screen shows Maeldun standing triumphantly with his fellow warlocks of Skalamont standing behind him. Strangely, Mildred is not in this image. I wonder what he would have done if the leveler had been victorious. Here is what the last screen has to say.
Konak and Damas were never seen again. Emperor Maeldun said that they died while killing Moagam, giving their lives for the glory of the Empire. They would be remembered as great heroes. Soon, Emperor Maeldun led his newly formed armies north to conquer the Trow's former homeland and the decimated lands of the 12 Duns. Even the Dwarven kingdoms fell to the might of his army. Only the nation of Gower resisted the might of the Emperor, but in time, they too fell.
The game has an epilogue dialogue similar to Myth 2, followed by a cutscene. In this epilogue, you will see a lot of the story tie into the Bungie Myth games. We will watch the epilogue first, and I will explain it fully.
The leveler Maeldun had been exposed and ultimately defeated. During the final battle, the axe of Konak had severed the head of Maeldun. Yet through some dark sorcery, the head refused to die, continuing to spit vulgar curses at Konak. Maeldun's dream powers had ended, but not his life. Mildred, who had aided them so much in the war, had in the end revealed himself as a traitor. Desiring the vast powers known only to the leveler, he had offered his soul in return for that knowledge. Konak and Damas could not bring themselves to kill the traitor they had once counted as their close friend. Konak spared him from death, but told him to flee and never to return. From now on, he would be known as the Deceiver. To ensure that the being known as Moagam would never again be resurrected, his body was incinerated. Those ashes were then mixed with sea salt and placed in a metal urn. That urn was then buried beneath the mountain of Kor, never again to see the light of day. Balal the Watcher had survived the war. Having fled from the pursuing Avatara, he was eventually hunted down and captured in a silver mine on the western side of the Cloud Spine. Believing a swift killing was too merciful for such a beast, the Watcher was imprisoned by a powerful spell, permanently sealing his body to the very rock of the mountain. No one can recall the fate of Maeldun's living head. After a long period of mourning for their much-loved Emperor Leitrim, Konak was crowned as the new emperor of the Cath-Bruig Empire. At his coronation, Emperor Konak issued 3 commands. Firstly, the city of Lankerfan was to be renamed Mirthemni to honor the brave Dwarfen smiths who had given their lives to save it. Secondly, for the honor of the Northmen of the 12 Duns who had fallen in battle, they were to be interred in the mausoleum of Clovis, the first emperor of the Cath-Bruig. And finally, the mountain pass where Emperor Leitrim fell to Moagam's blade was to be renamed the Stair of Grief. And with that, Emperor Konak began the rebuilding of the great city of Mirthemni. It was the end of the Wind Age, and the beginning of the Wolf Age.
Maeldun is certainly the head in Myth the Fallen Lords. The head in the Bungie Myth games claimed to be an enemy of Konak. The head in the Out of the Barrier journal also claimed to have been a close advisor to Konak and to have been beheaded by Balor. Maeldun, being the head in Myth the Fallen Lords, lines up almost perfectly. It makes a lot of sense why the head would want to help the province defeat Balor when you consider the Myth 3 story. The dialogue says that Maeldun's dream spells had ended, but not his life. This is similar to Balor's head having still been alive. Is this a running trend with the All-Levelers? I would argue that Maeldun still has some dream spells, because if he is the head in Myth the Fallen Lords, as the game seems to be setting up, then how would he continue to survive even after the leveler leaves him? Whatever that means exactly. In fact, the Soulblighter manual tells us that it is animated by its own arcane magic. The epilogue tells us that they do not know what happened to the head. This is another indication that Maeldun still had some dream spells he could cast. One dream spell I am convinced that Maeldun still had as the head is the Binding Dream. The evidence for this is his ability to play Emperor Leitrim like a fiddle. One of my subscribers mentioned that this reminds him of how in Lord of the Rings, King Theoden was poisoned by his chief advisor, and he was basically also being mind controlled. With the Binding Dream spell, Maeldun would have been able to mind control someone and escape without anyone noticing. The Soulblighter manual says that the head was discovered buried under tons of sand and rock. The Wolf Age manual, on the other hand, tells us that the head was found in the bowels of a dark mountain. This is a potential conflict, but perhaps both could be true. Suppose the head escaped on the way back to Lancrefin and was buried over the years somewhere along the cloud spine. When the barrier was formed, it could have been enveloped in sand. Might make some sense. Also, if the head escaped somehow on the way back to Lancrefin, it would make sense as to why they never were able to kill him once and for all. Mordred was designated as a traitor and earned the name the Deceiver. They spared his life and let him flee to never return. The timing of when he became called the Deceiver is in conflict with the Through the Ermine journal that tells us that Balor called him the Deceiver after bending him to his will. With Mordred being friends with Damas and Ravana, it brings a whole new meaning to the derangement in which he was eager to put an end to them in Myth 2 Soulblighter. It makes more sense that he has become as crazy as he is after being banished from his friends. I tend to think of the Deceiver as the most misunderstood hero in the Myth series. In the Wolf Age, he saved our heroes countless times. In Myth 2 Soulblighter, he was the main turning point in the war. Even in Myth the Fallen Lords, Balor was not able to control him fully, and he was a constant hindrance to the Watcher. Considering Mordred's Binding Dream spell and vast intelligence, it is no wonder that Balor had such a tough time controlling him. Do you guys think that Mordred knew what he was getting into when he signed on with Maeldun, or was he blinded by his lust for power? Or maybe both? Mordred would have been the most logical person for the warlocks of Skalamas to follow after the death of Maeldun, so I would imagine some of them chose to leave Lancrefin with him. This of course makes sense why the warlocks were searching for his frozen body in Myth 2. Considering that Maeldun, who trained Mordred, could survive as just a head, it makes sense that Mordred could survive under a patch of ice for 60 years. Taking a look back in this game, though, it starts to make sense how Mordred knew that Maeldun was still alive. After all, Maeldun was slain by Balal the Watcher just centuries before the start of Myth 3, according to the Forgotten Lands journal. If this was the case, That would mean that Majoran was a leveler who the Watcher was serving when he killed Mazarin. That means if Mazarin somehow survived as a Shade, the Watcher may have known about it, and thus Majoran would have known about it. This information then could have been passed on to Mildred through Majoran. Makes sense why Mildred doesn't reveal his reasoning for knowing Mazarin was still alive. The epilogue tells us that they burned Mogam's body, placed his ashes with sea salt in a metal urn, and buried his ashes under the mountains of Kor. They did this because they didn't want Mogam coming back a third time. This is exactly how the Soulblighter epilogue says they disposed of the leveler's body at the end of the 4th era. The main problem being that in this era, Mogam was not the true leveler. Perhaps you could say that in history, Mogam went down as a leveler to the common folk. You could also say that this is a conflict in the game. Now, as far as where the mountains of Kor are that he was buried in, I have no idea, and I don't believe the game gives us any indication. Next, the epilogue tells us about how Balal the Watcher was still alive and was hunted down by the Avatara and finally captured at the silver mines. The Avatara believed that the Watcher's wrongdoings were too great to allow him to have a swift end, so they imprisoned him in a powerful spell, permanently sealing his body to the rock of the mountain. Of course, this description of what is happening is setting things up for Myth the Fallen Lords. Here is a quote from the Silvermines Journal.
The old stories all tell that when Balor freed the Watcher from his prison under the Cloudspine, one arm was left trapped in his prison of solid rock. Bound by a powerful confinement dream, it should have remained there forever, but it didn't.
After mourning the death of Emperor Leitrim back in Lancrefin, Konak was crowned the new Emperor of the Cathbrug. The Myth the Fallen Lords manual tells us that Konak had become the Emperor starting the Age of Light. On a side note, when it comes to the ages, I tend to think that not all the ages necessarily refer to the Dark Light cycles. For example, the Age of Light and the Wolf Age, both starting, can refer to different things. The Wolf Age is about Konak being Emperor, while the Age of Light is about the new Light cycle. To start his reign as Emperor, Konak issued 3 commands. The first command was to rename Lancrefin to Mirthamni to honor the Dwarves who gave their lives to save it. Both the Fallen Lords and Soulblighter manual talk about the Tain being constructed within Mirthamni, so the Dwarves having been there is in line with the Bungie games. Lancrefin is only referred to a couple of times in the Bungie Myth games. One of those times is in the Ibis Crown mission, where Ulrich says that Lancrefin will once again be the seat of the Cathbrug Empire with him as Emperor. The second command was to honor the northern men of the 12 Duns by burying them within the mausoleum of Clovis, the first Emperor of the Cathbrug. This was told about from the Myth 2 Berserk Ghost flavor text. In honor of their heroism, Konak allowed the men of the north who had been slain defending Lancrefin to be buried in the mausoleum of Clovis, the royal crypt of the Cathbrug. The last thing that Konak did was to rename the Norn Pass to the Sterigrieve in honor of Emperor Leitrim. The Sterigrieve being renamed is not mentioned in the Bungie Myth games, but it does add a nice touch to the meaning behind the name. There are still quite a few things I would like to wrap up, but first let's watch the ending cutscene for the game.
Many years after the close of the Wind Age, Emperor Konak called Damas into the Imperial Chamber.
Damas, how run the armies of the Empire?
Very well, my Emperor. It has been a long time since last we spoke.
Too long, my friend. How fares Ravana?
She's busy teaching Finn how to fight.
He has his father's skill, I bet.
And his mother's temper.
You have a good family, Damas.
Thank you, my Emperor.
Damas, I have a quest for you.
A quest? That'll solve any boredom I've gained by training the troops.
The quest is a serious one, my friend. I bid you to gather the items of power left in the world. Items like the Tain, the Sunhammer, the Eblis Stones, and the Trabist's Mirror. Gather together all the items of power remaining in the hands of men and bring them here.
I shall bring them to you, my Emperor.
No, do not bring them to me. When you gather them, you are to hide them from me. Burn those that will burn, and bury those that will not. And never let me know where you have hidden them, never.
Yes, my Emperor. I will do as you wish. But answer me, why do you ask this? You could use these things for the benefit of the Cath Bruig. Why destroy them?
Ever since we met with the Shade Mazarin have I known the future. Not everything, mind you, but the major events. I knew that there was a traitor among us. I knew that I would become Emperor. But it is the future that concerns me.
How so?
The world, my friend, has a nature to it. A cycle of light and dark that controls the very destiny of mankind. We have surfaced from an age of darkness into a new age of light, but the world will not always be so. I know that the darkness will return, that I will return, and bring in the new age of darkness.
Preposterous. You cannot mean that.
If only it were a lie, but I cannot believe that it is. That is why I bid you to destroy the artifacts of power. When the darkness resurfaces, I do not want it to have access to those items of destruction. You will humor an old man, won't you?
Though I do not completely understand, I will do this for you.
I pray that you never do understand. You are a good general, Damas, and the closest of friends.
And you mine, my Emperor.
We learn that Damas and Ravana have a kid named Finn who is learning how to fight from his parents. Some people wondered what happened to Finn, but there is literally nothing else in any of the games telling us anything about Finn, so enjoy letting your imagination run wild. Konak entrusts Damas to destroy and hide the weapons of power throughout the world of myth. Konak tells Damas that he will return to bring about the next age of darkness. Konak does not want to have these items of power when he returns as the leveler. In fact, Konak goes even farther and eventually leaves Mirthemni in anticipation of his turning. Take a look at this unused post-epilogue dialogue from Myth 3. With the armies of Moagim destroyed and the Mercuria and Trow defeated, peace flourished over the lands of man. Konak proved himself to be a strong and just emperor. Reuniting the scattered remnants of the 12 Duns, he gave aid to the rebuilding of their once great nation. The Dwarven kingdoms would eventually come to think of the empire of the Cath Bruig as brothers. Emperor Konak began a dynasty that will last for hundreds of years. It is said that in Konak's 100th year, he left the mighty city of Mirthemni alone and on foot. Eventually, he traveled to his beloved nation of Gower and saw how his people had prospered. From there, legends say that Konak disappeared into the unknown east, not to be seen again for 1,000 years. This lines up well with what the Myth of Fallen Lords manual that tells us this. When the Mercuria disappeared, Konak ascended to the Emperor's throne and presided over what is known as the Age of Light. His story fades away at this point. Some say he died, or was assassinated, or kidnapped. Others say he left Mirthemni in search of some powerful artifact. Supposedly, the immense power of items like the Tain both fascinated and terrified him, and he is known to have sought out objects of similar power. The 5 Eblis stones, Tramis mirror, the Total Codex. He destroyed the ones he could and secreted the rest. In any case, none of them have been seen in centuries. We can discern that Konak likely left because of his fear of becoming leveler, but perhaps some of the rumors about him looking for the items of immense power are also true, as leveler took him over after leaving Mirthemni. The items of power that we know were hidden or destroyed by Damas are the Tain, the Sunhammer, the 5 Eblis stones, and Tramas mirror. Myth 3 incorrectly calls Tramis mirror as Trabis mirror in the epilogue, by the way. This is likely because they copied the same error in GURPS. Anyways, all of the items of power appear in the future games except the Sunhammer. Perhaps the Sunhammer was destroyed. Or perhaps Damas couldn't bring himself to destroy any of the items of power. Notice that Damas was a bit hesitant at first to Konak's command.
Yes, my Emperor. I will do as you wish. But answer me, why do you ask this? You could use these things for the benefit of the Cath Brewing. Why destroy them?
Is it possible that Damas neglected Konak's commands and only hid them instead of attempting to destroy them? Notice in Myth the Fallen Lords how Soulblighter knows almost exactly where to find the Tane. Of course, this is because he is the one who hid it there. On the other hand, though, Damas was one of Konak's most fiercely loyal soldiers. Could it be that the Leveler was starting to take over Konak, and that it was the Leveler that influenced Damas to not destroy the artifacts of power? We know that Balor started forming his army a few hundred years before the start of the Myth the Fallen Lords game, and going off of the 500-year Dark Light era links in the Bungie games, that would mean that if Konak left Muthemi 100 years after the start of the Light Cycle, he would be already starting to form his army just 100 years after leaving. Perhaps Konak left Muthemi quickly and silently, noticing that the Leveler's influence was already overtaking him. So, when did Damas and Ravana start to turn towards following Balor? Probably not long after Konak left Muthemi. It is strange that Konak knew about all that was written in the Tane, yet he didn't know that Damas would become Soulblighter. If he knew, he wouldn't have had Damas hide these items for him, would he? Or perhaps he did know and he was already compromised at the time of this cutscene. It is fun to consider these possibilities as it draws a whole lot of new meaning to this ending cutscene. Thankfully, at least one of the Eblis stones fell into the hands of the Avatar. Considering how loyal Damas was to Konak, it makes some sense that he would fiercely carry on the will of Balor even after his death. Since Shiver was Damas' lover, she would follow suit with him. It can be a bit sad to see how the Leveler corrupts these heroes and turns them into something so evil. Now, before we conclude Myth 3 The Wolf Age, I have one more very interesting tidbit to talk about that I think almost everyone will thoroughly enjoy contemplating. Let's talk for a bit about the lineage of the Binding Dream spell. Where did it originate? I think I know the answer. What is the first known occurrence of this spell being used? Well, it would be by the Trow priests, of course. As we learn in the Myth 3 game, there is some sort of dream spell that they are controlling the ogre with. In fact, if Mildred uses the released dream on the ogre in-game, the Trow priests can cast a spell to take them back, which is clearly the Binding Dream. Now, where did the Trow priests learn this dream spell? The Myth 3 manual tells us that Nyx taught the Trow their dreams. The Binding Dream has to be one of the most powerful dream spells, so it would make sense that it would have to come straight from Nyx. More than likely, Nyx would have taught the Trow this dream after they captured the ogre. Now, who is the next to use the dream spell after the Trow? Maeldun, of course. He could have used this dream spell to influence the Emperor. There are several indications of some sort of mind control stuff going on with the Emperor within the Myth 3 journals. In fact, this carries on to Myth the Fallen Lords. If you remember, the head had caused a sort of civil war within the province. Take a look back at this excerpt from the Sons of Mirgard journal.
Worst of all, what's left of the Nine had it out with the head, which had apparently been double-crossing them ever since they pulled it out of the ground last summer. Something like a civil war erupted back west, too, as thousands of our own men unexpectedly rose to defend the head. 2 of the 9 were killed, which makes them something like the 3 now, if you also subtract Mergen and Kuroy, who did not escape the destruction of the Tane, and the others who have died this year.
Now why would some rise up to defend the head? Why, because of the Binding Dream, of course. Maeldun must have learned his dream spell straight from the Trow. As you would guess by now, Mildred learned this dream from Maeldun. To me, it seems like Scott Campbell figured out how to tie all this Binding Dream stuff together. You can tell he put in a lot of time into studying the Bungie games. And with that, we conclude Myth 3 The Wolf Age. I hope that with these videos, you have a new respect for the Myth 3 story. While there are several problems with it like we discussed, once you really dig down into the nitty-gritty, it does an excellent job of tying a lot of the story from the Bungie Myth games together. The main problem that I think most fans have with it is that it solves a little bit too much of the unknown. The fun part about the Bungie story was thinking about the possibilities. What do you guys think about Myth 3? Did you enjoy the series? Did you learn much? Do you view the game differently than before? I would love to hear about what you guys have to say in the comments. Now, while the 3 Myth games are over, there is still this little sort of expansion campaign called Chimera that was made by Badlands and some of the Bungie staff. I will be studying the story for you guys and explaining it all in detail. You know the drill by now. See you next time in Chimera.
Savage!